Still trying. The knife cleared the sheath before anyone on that street moved a muscle. Everyone froze except Caleb Hurst. He was already moving. He crossed that street in 4 seconds flat. No warning, no hesitation. Still trying. Just a man who had spent 5 years telling himself nothing was his problem anymore. And a single moment that proved every word of it was a lie. The first punch dropped Draper like a sack of grain. The second man reached for his pistol. Caleb broke his wrist before it cleared the holster. The third man ran, smart kid. And then Caleb turned around, and the woman, standing against that saloon wall, red marks on her throat, chin still up, but a single tremor in her jaw, looked at him the way no one had looked at him in 5 years. Like he was still a person worth seeing. He told her to leave. She said, "Why did you help me?" He said, "It doesn't matter." Still trying. He'd looked at Draper unconscious in the dirt and then back at Caleb. Then she walked away. No thank you. No fear. Just gone. He rode home 8 miles through the desert thinking he'd never see her again. She was already at his fence when he got there. Bill made coffee. And what she said next changed everything. Bill Scott. Arizona Territory. July 1878, the sun came down like a judgment. It hit the dirt streets at an angle that turned everything the color of old bone. The storefronts, the water troughs, still trying. The faces of men who had been out west long enough to forget they'd ever been young. Heat like that didn't just warm a place. It pressed down on it, flattened it, made everything slow and mean and slightly desperate. Caleb Hurst stood in the strip of shadow beneath the overhang of Murphy's General Store, with his arms crossed and his hat pulled low, and his eyes doing what they always did. Watching, not because he cared what he saw. Still trying, because watching was something to do that wasn't thinking, and thinking, in Caleb's experience, was a luxury a man paid for with sleep. He was 35 years old. He looked older, not in his face exactly. Still trying. His face was lean and weathered and still carried the architecture of something that had once been handsome, but in the way he held his body, that particular stillness of a man who had stopped expecting things to go right. Still trying, like a door that had been open too long and learned to stay shut on its own. 3 years in Prescott, 3 years of horse trading and nodding at people in the street, and accepting that this nothing was what the rest of his life was going to be. Still trying. He had told himself that was fine. He had told himself a lot of things. The town moved around him the way water moves around a rock. Sheriff Beale crossed the far end of the street with 2 deputies at his heels. A wagon loaded with lumber groaned past, still trying, the driver cursing at his horses in Spanish. 2 women in good dresses stepped out of the milliner's shop and opened their parasols against the murderous sun. Caleb watched all of it. And none of it. It was 5 years ago. He had been a different man in a different standing outside a burning house in Sena, Kansas, and every morning since then he had woken up and found that man further away and more unreachable than the day before. Rosie, still trying, 4 years old. She had a wooden horse her grandfather carved for her from cottonwood. She carried it everywhere, even to bed. Stop. He stopped. That was the deal he had with himself. He could go up to the edge. He could say the name. Still trying. But he did not go further than that. He did not think about He did not think about what the deputy had told him when Caleb finally made it back to Sena. He did not think about the things that didn't add up, the tracks that weren't Apache tracks. Still trying. The burn pattern on the east wall that said the fire had started from outside. The patrol that had arrived 5 minutes too late. 5 minutes. He had spent 5 years with those 5 minutes. That was enough thinking. He shifted his weight, looked down the street, and that was when he saw her. She came from the south end of Main Street, walking alone, head up, spine straight as a rifle barrel. She was Apache. That was clear from 20 yards. Dark hair pulled back, calico dress that had seen better days, worn like it had been chosen deliberately and not apologetically, cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes, even at this distance, still trying, even under the hammer blow of the July sun, eyes that said she was not afraid of this town. She should have been afraid of this town. Caleb watched her move past the hardware store, past the boarding house, still trying, past the knot of men loitering in the shade of the Lucky Star Saloon, who all turned their heads the same way, like a pack of dogs catching a scent. He watched Frank Donner appear in the doorway of the general store behind him, still trying. "That's one of the Canyon Indians," Donner said. To the air, or to Caleb, or to God. Hard to tell with Donner. Caleb said nothing. "She's got nerve, coming in alone like that." Still nothing. Her people have been trouble north of here. Still trying. 2 freighters got hit last month on the Wickenburg Road. Caleb pulled his hat a 1/4 inch lower and kept watching. Because here was the thing about frontier rumors. They had the same problem as frontier justice, still trying. They didn't much concern themselves with the difference between what happened and what was convenient to believe had happened. 2 freighters dead, Apache trouble. One conclusion, simple. Clean, never mind whether anyone had actually looked at the track, still trying. He knew something about the woman stopped in front of the Lockstar Star. 3 men stepped out to meet her. Caleb recognized them. Draper and 2 others, Copper Ridge miners, the kind of men who were large and bored and had been drinking since before noon. Draper was the biggest, shoulders like a draft horse, and a grin that had nothing friendly in it. Well, hell, Draper said, loud. Theatrical, still trying. Look what came walking into town. The woman didn't flinch. She'd said something in Apache, calm, cold. 2 words, maybe 3. Caleb didn't speak the language, but he understood the tone. The tone was, still trying. You are beneath my attention and I am saying this anyway, out of courtesy. Draper laughed like she'd told a joke. The second man, thin scar across the bridge of his nose, circled behind her. Slow, deliberate, Caleb's hands uncrossed. He told himself, still trying. Not your problem. He had gotten good at that sentence over 5 years. It was a useful sentence. It kept a man alive and anonymous, and exactly where he'd decided to stay. The third man, youngest of the 3, barely old enough to shave, just stood there, grinning at the ground. The woman said something else. Draper stepped closer. Too close, Caleb told himself. Still not your problem. This town has a sheriff. Let the town handle its own. Still trying. You are a man who trades horses and keeps his head down, and that is all you are and all you are going to be, and you made that decision a long time ago, and… Draper grabbed her by the throat, slammed her back against the saloon wall, and pulled a knife. Still trying. Caleb was across the street before the knife finished, clearing its sheath. He didn't remember deciding to move. He was just moving. Still trying. The first punch landed on Draper's jaw like a door slamming shut. The sound echoed off the storefronts. That particular crack of knuckle on bone that makes everyone in earshot stop what they're doing. Draper went down sideways, still trying. The knife spinning off the boardwalk into the dirt. The scar-nosed man spun around, reaching for his holster. Caleb was faster. He caught the man's wrist before the pistol cleared leather. Twisted hard, sharp, precise, still trying. The kind of technique you only knew if someone had spent a long time teaching you how to break people efficiently, and drove his knee up into the man's midsection. The man folded like wet paper, wheezing, still trying. The young one took one look at the 2 of them on the ground and put both hands up so fast. He nearly hit himself in the face. I wasn't doing anything. Go, Caleb said. The kid went. Caleb turned, still trying. The woman was standing against the wall, where Draper had slammed her, one hand at her throat. Breathing, controlled, deliberate, like she was running an inventory of herself and refusing to let the results show on her face. Her eyes found his. A long moment, she just looked at him. Not with gratitude. Not with relief. With the particular measuring quality of someone deciding whether the thing in front of them was dangerous or useful, or both. He had seen that look before, still trying. He had never seen it on a woman standing against a saloon wall with red marks on her throat. You should go, he said quietly. Why did you help me? Her English was perfect. Not accented perfect, just perfect. The kind of careful, still trying, precise English that came from having been taught by someone who understood that a person who spoke well could not be dismissed as easily. Caleb blinked. He hadn't expected that. Doesn't matter, he said. Leave. Before he gets up, looked at Draper on the ground, then back at Caleb. Something moved behind her eyes. Not warmth exactly, more like the updating of a calculation. She walked away. Not quickly, not running, just turned and walked unhurried, still trying. Into the maze of alleys behind the saloon, and disappeared like she had simply decided to stop being visible. Caleb stood on the boardwalk. Half the street was staring. Frank Donner was shaking his head slowly from his doorway, still trying, with the expression of a man watching someone light their own house on fire. You just bought yourself a world of trouble, Hurst. Caleb didn't answer. He went back to the store, paid for his supplies, loaded his saddlebags, rode out of town with the particular feeling of a man who has done something he can't undo and isn't sure yet whether he regrets it. He was 8 miles out before the feeling faded. It did not fade completely, still trying. The ranch at Mogollon sat in a shallow valley where the scrub brush gave way to cracked earth and stands of cottonwood that were never quite as green as they should have been. A house, a barn, a corral, a water pump that needed persuading every 3rd morning, still trying. Caleb had built most of it with his own hands by board, post by post. The way a man builds something when what he's really doing is trying to give himself a reason to still be standing at the end of each day. It didn't feel like a home. Still trying. He had stopped expecting it to. He unsaddled Smoke, the gray mare he'd bought off a Navajo trader 2 years ago, the best horse he'd ever owned, the only creature in Arizona he was genuinely glad to see every morning, and led her into the barn, filled her water, measured out her feed, stood for a moment in the barn doorway, watching the last summer sun bleed out over the western ridgeline. The sky turned the color of a bruise, purple and orange, and a thin line of red along the horizon that looked, still trying. If you were in a certain kind of mood, like something burning far away, he was in a certain kind of mood. He was about to go inside when he saw her. She was standing near the corral fence, arms at her sides, completely still. If she'd been there for hours and had decided to simply become part of the landscape until he noticed her. Caleb's hand dropped to the revolver at his hip. How did you find this place? I followed you. Yes. He stared at her. 8 miles, still trying, over rough terrain, on foot, in the direction he'd traveled, which he had not made obvious because he never did. That's either brave or foolish, he said. The corners of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, both, she said, stepped forward into the last of the light. He could see her more clearly now, the marks on her throat from Draper's hand, the set of her jaw, which had not softened since the saloon and showed no signs of starting, still trying, and something in her eyes that he hadn't been able to read at a distance, desperation, very carefully controlled. Like a fire behind glass. My name is Sena, she said. I don't need your name. You will. He almost laughed. Almost. Whatever you want. Still trying. He said, You've come to the wrong man. I don't think so, ma'am. You fight like someone who was trained. You moved across that street before any other man in that town even turned his head. She stopped 6 feet from him. You live alone. Still for years. You have for years. You trade horses, but you watch everything and you trust no one. A pause. You are carrying something old and heavy, and you have been carrying it so long you have mistaken it for who you are. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the scrub a nighthawk called. My people are dying, Sena said. Not from bullets, not from disease, from time. There are 30 of us left, mostly women, mostly children. The men who remain are too old or too broken, without new blood, without something to carry us forward. She stopped. We will pierce. Not in a battle. Not with any dignity. We will simply stop being. Caleb looked at her. What does that have to do with me? She held his gaze. Still trying. I want you to father my child. Still trying. The words landed in the air between them and stayed there. Caleb blinked. Then he laughed. Not a warm laugh. A sharp, involuntary sound like something being knocked loose. He shook his head and turned back toward the house. Get off my land. Still trying. I will stay here for 90 days. He stopped. You will teach me to survive what is coming. You will teach me to shoot, to fight, to read terrain the way soldiers do. And when the time is right, her voice didn't waver. You will give my people a future. Still trying. He turned around slowly. You're out of your mind. I am out of options. There is a difference. Find someone else. There is no one else. The men in that town would use me and leave me dead in a ditch. The soldiers would be worse. She took one step closer. Still trying. You are different. You saw me as a person worth defending before you knew anything about me. That is rarer than you understand. You don't know anything about me. I know you are alone, simply, without pity, just as a fact. Still trying. I know you have been alone for a long time. I know you built this place and live in it like a man serving a sentence. She paused. And I know something happened to you, something you have never been able to prove. Something that put out whatever fire you had. Her jaw tightened. Get off my land, he said again. I will be at the east fence at sunrise, Sena said. She turned and walked back into the dark without any hurry at all. You do not have to come out. But I think you will. He stared after her for a long time, still trying. Then he went inside and sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. He was not going to go out to the east fence at sunrise. That was final. That was decided. He sat there in the dark for 2 hours telling himself that. Still trying. He went out to the east fence at sunrise. She was already there, coffee. She had made coffee somehow over a tiny fire of dried sage and juniper bark in a battered tin pot she'd been carrying in a bag slung over one shoulder. Still trying. The smell of it hit him before he was 10 yards from the fence, and his body betrayed him completely by wanting it. She held out a cup. He took it, stewed on his side of the fence. She stood on hers. They drank. You're not going to make this easy, are you? Still trying. He said, No, Sena said. You understand this is a lunatic idea. I understand that every idea looks lunatic until it becomes the only one that makes sense. He looked at her over the rim of his cup, still trying. In the early morning light, she looked less like someone who had been grabbed by the throat in a saloon and more like someone who had made a series of extremely deliberate choices and was prepared to defend every single one of them. "Why me specifically?" he said. Not a question. More like an accusation. She looked out toward the valley. "Because you watched me walk that entire street," she said. "And the only thing you saw was that I was in trouble." He had no answer for that. "Also," she said, still trying, with something in her voice that might have been the very distant ancestor of humor, "you make a decent cup of coffee." He looked down at his cup. "You made the coffee." "I did. With your supplies from your barn." She glanced at him sideways, still trying. "You should lock your barn." He stared at her. She looked back out at the valley, completely serene. "Tell me about the man you used to be," she said. "Before whatever happened happened." "No, then tell me about your horse." "She's a good mare." He blinked, still trying. "What?" "The gray. She's well-tempered, but she favors her left foreleg on cold mornings." "You should check the shoe." Caleb turned and looked at smoke in the corral 30 yards away. He turned back. "How did you?" "I watched for a long time before I followed you," Sena said. Simply, he stood there for a moment. Just processing that. "Fine, her name is Smoke," he finally said. "Good name. Bought her off a Navajo trader. He gave you a fair price." "He absolutely did not give me a fair price." Still trying. The corner of Sena's mouth moved, just barely. Caleb looked at the fence between them. Thought about what she'd said the night before. "You are carrying something." "Something old and heavy?" "I had a daughter," he said, still trying. He hadn't said those words out loud in almost 3 years. The weight of them was different than he expected. Not lighter, just different. Like putting down a stone you'd been holding so long you'd forgotten it was a stone and thought it was just your hand. Still trying. Sena didn't say she was sorry, didn't say anything, just waited. The way people wait when they understand that silence is sometimes the most respectful thing you can offer. "Her name was Rosie," Caleb said. "She was 4. Had a wooden horse she carried everywhere." He stopped. Sena nodded. "Once. Small. My father's name was Casas," she said. "He was a leader of our band. He spoke 5 languages including English, which he taught me from the time I could walk." Still trying. "Because he said a woman who could speak well could not be made invisible." She looked at her coffee. "He was shot in front of me when I was 11 years old. For refusing to sign a paper." Silence. "Did they take the land anyway?" Caleb asked. "Yes." Still trying. "Then what was the point of refusing?" Sena looked at him then, directly. The point," she said, "was that he refused. Told himself she'd be gone in a week." She wasn't gone in a week. She built a camp at the edge of his property, just inside the boundary line. She was making a point, and they both knew it, with a precision and efficiency that was frankly a little unsettling. Waterproof. Lean-to. Fire pit angled to minimize smoke. Gear packed and stacked in order of likely need. Told himself he wasn't watching. He was absolutely watching. By the 3rd morning, he had stopped pretending he wasn't going to the east fence and just went directly. By the 4th morning, she started bringing extra coffee, still trying. By the 5th morning, he was leaning on the fence post with both arms, and they were talking about horses and weather, and the particular quality of Arizona silence, still trying, which was different from Kansas silence in ways that Caleb had never tried to articulate before and found, to his mild alarm, that he had a lot to say about. She listened differently than most people, not waiting for her turn, just actually listening, still trying. Like what he said was going to matter later, and was filing it away somewhere careful. It made him talk more than he intended. On the evening of the 6th day, he was sitting on the porch when she appeared at the edge of the fire, still trying. "Your barn door needs a new hinge," she said. "I know. The bottom rail of the corral fence is rotting. I know that too. The pump will fail before winter if you don't repack the seal." He looked at her. "Are you inspecting my property?" Still trying. "I am noting that a man who is as capable as you appear to be is allowing things to fall apart around him." She said it evenly. "Which tells me something." He waited. "It tells me you are not sure you plan to still be here when they matter." Still trying. The night was very quiet. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Maybe not." She stood there in the firelight, not quite in it, not quite out of it. "But I am still here, Caleb Hurst. Which means I have 90 days to find out." Still trying. He wanted to say something sharp. Something that would end this conversation and put him back on the side of the fence where he decided to stay. Instead, he said, "The barn door, hinge is in the 2nd drawer of the workbench." Still trying. "I'll need a hammer," she said. "Also in the barn." She turned and walked toward the barn. He sat on the porch watching her go. Thought, this is a mistake. thought, still trying. She is going to fix my barn door, and I am going to let her. And that is that thought, still trying. Rosie used to ask why the barn smelled like horses and hay, and he had told her, because that's what it's made of. And she had thought about that for a long time, and then said, but the house is made of wood, and it doesn't smell like trees. Still trying. He pressed his hand flat against his knee, felt the familiar weight of 5 years settle back into his chest. Went inside. On the 7th day, Colonel Mason Reeve came calling. Caleb heard the horses first, the particular cadence of a military formation. Still trying. Controlled and deliberate, 6 riders moving with the synchronized confidence of men who expected the world to get out of their way. Smoke lifted her head from her hay, and her ears went flat. Animals always know. Still trying. He set down the bridle he'd been cleaning and walked out into the morning, 6 riders in the gray-brown uniform of the Arizona Territorial Militia. At the front, a tall man, maybe 54. Straight in the saddle, gray hair beneath his hat, still trying. A face like something carved from sandstone and then weathered for a very long time. Caleb had never seen him before. He recognized him anyway, the way you recognize the thing you've been looking for before you know what you're looking at. Still trying. Reeve pulled his horse to a stop 20 feet from the barn. His men fanned out behind him in a casual semicircle that was not casual at all. Mr. Hurst, Reeve said, the kind of voice trained to carry across distances, smooth, measured, still trying. The voice of a man who had never needed to shout. Colonel, Caleb said, I'm told you had an altercation in town yesterday. On behalf of an Apache woman, I stopped 3 men from cutting a woman's throat. Yes, that Apache woman is a known agitator. Still trying. Reeve's eyes were the particular pale gray of old ice. Give me the woman. Step back. Go on with your life. No action will be taken against you, and if I don't, then you are harboring an enemy of the territorial government. Still trying, and we will treat you accordingly. The silence had weight to it. One of Reeve's men shifted in his saddle. Leather creaking. Caleb looked at Reeve's face, looking for something specific. Still trying. The thing you look for in a man's face when you need to know if he's the kind who gives an order and walks away or the kind who stays to watch. He found it. You've got until sundown tomorrow, Reeve said, pulling his horse around. Still trying. You've already lost everything once. Don't make me take what's left. He rode away. His men rode with him. Caleb stood in the yard until they crested the ridge and disappeared. Behind him, from the direction of the barn, he heard Sena's quiet footstep. Still trying. How long were you listening? He asked, without turning. From the beginning, she came to stand beside him. They both looked at the empty ridge. You should have given me up, probably. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a moment, still trying. Because he said it. He'd already decided it was going to happen, Caleb said. And I've spent 5 years letting other people decide what happens. She looked at him sideways. He turned to face her. Tell me everything you know about Mason Reeve, he said. Everything. Starting with Sena, Kansas. July of 1873, something shifted in Sena's eyes. Not surprise, recognition. Like a woman who has been carrying a heavy thing for a very long time and has finally found someone knows why it's heavy. Inside. Still trying, she said. They went inside. Still trying. She talked for 2 hours. Caleb sat at the kitchen table and did not move. She stood at the window with her arms crossed, looking out at the yard, and she talked in that level, still trying, precise way of hers. The way that said this is not easy, but I will not let it show. And what she said rearranged everything. She had been 17 years old in the summer of 1873. Her band had been camped in the low hills south of Sena, Kansas. Temporary, still trying. Passing through the way the Chiricahua moved in those years. Always passing through because there was less and less that was not passing through. She had been alone on the ridge collecting medicinal plants her mother had sent her for when the riders came. Apache riders, militia, 20, maybe 22 men in the gray-brown uniform. Moving fast. No torches, the fires they set with lanterns they smashed against the walls. She had watched from the ridge in the dark, too far to do anything, too close to look away. A settlement on the eastern edge of Sena. 4 buildings. A barn. A water tower. They burned it in 11 minutes, she had counted, because counting was something to do that wasn't screaming, Clara, Caleb said. Still trying. His voice came out flat. Like a word in a language he'd forgotten he spoke. That was her name, Sena said. A woman came out of the main house. She was carrying a child, very small, 4 years old, perhaps, and she ran toward the barn. Then she stopped, and paused. She put the child down and told her to run, and then she went back. She went back for the horse, Caleb said, a small wooden horse. It had fallen near the porch. He closed his eyes, Rosie, still trying. Who would rather have left the wooden horse than made her mother go back? Who would have been heartbroken for days if they'd left it? The child ran toward the far field, Sena said. I lost sight of her in the dark. I do not know. She didn't make it, Philip said. Flat, quiet. They found her in the field. Silence. I tried to tell someone, Sena said. A week later, a month later, still trying. I found a town with a sheriff's office and I said I had witnessed the burning of a settlement near Sena and it was not Apache who did it. It was militia. And? The sheriff wrote something on a piece of paper. Thanked me. Asked me to wait outside. Didn't look at him. I waited for 2 hours. Then, a deputy came out and told me the investigation had concluded. It was Apache raiders and my statement was inconsistent with the existing record and I should return to my people. Caleb was very still trying. I was 10 years old, Sena said. I did not know then whose militia it was, whose order it was. I spent 5 years. Finding that out, she turned from the window. Looked at him directly. Colonel Mason Reeve, still trying. The settlement sat on the direct path of the western spur of the Union Pacific Rail line. The land was bought, at government auction 14 months later, at a price that suggested no competing bids. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, somewhere distant, still trying, a dove called twice and stopped. You came to me because of this, Caleb said. I came to you because my people are dying, and I need what I told you I need. She didn't flinch, still trying. But I also came to you because you are the only person alive who has a reason to make noise about what Reeve did. Because you are white and you are a man, and the world will listen to you in a way it will never listen to me. She paused, still trying. And because you have been standing in ash for 5 years when you could have been building something. He looked at his hands on the table. Large hands, strong hands, still trying. Hands that had built the ranch board by board and done absolutely nothing with themselves that mattered for 5 years. You walked into that saloon knowing those men would. I walked into press because I needed to see you, she said, simply trying. The rest happened because men like Draper are predictable. He stared at her. You planned it, he said. I observed that you went to town every Tuesday for supplies. I observed that you watched the street, still trying. I observed that you were the kind of man who moved first and thought later when someone was being hurt. She met his eyes without apology. I needed to know if you were still alive in there. Under all that quiet, and, still trying, you threw a punch before your coffee cup was cold, she said. You are still alive in there. He sat back in the chair, thought, I should be furious. Thought, I am furious. Thought, still trying. Also, she is the only person in 5 years who has made me feel like anything is real. Thought, do not think that last thought again. 90 days, he said. She looked at him. 90 days, Caleb said. I teach you to shoot, to fight, to survive whatever Reeve is going to throw at us when he comes back. Because he is coming back. He met her eyes. And you tell me everything. Every name, every detail, every piece of evidence you have about what happened in Sena. Other thing I asked. He was quiet for a moment. That is not a conversation I am ready to have, he said. Sena nodded. Once. Small. Then we start with what you are ready for, she said, still trying. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him at the table and folded her hands and waited with the absolute patience of someone who had learned that some men needed time to catch up to the decisions they'd already made. Outside, still trying. The morning light shifted. The valley was very still. Somewhere in the barn, smoke shifted her weight and exhaled. 90 days, Caleb Hurst looked across the table at a woman he had met 4 days ago, who had walked 8 miles in the dark to find him, still trying. Who had carried the truth, who family for 5 years, in a world that wouldn't listen to her. Who had a 17-year-old girl's memory of his wife going back for a wooden horse, burned somewhere behind her eyes. He thought about Clara, still trying. He thought about Rosie. He thought about 5 years of ash and silence and nothing. He thought, this is going to cost me everything. He thought, good. I wasn't doing anything with it anyway. We start tomorrow, he said. Before sunrise, I know. Sena said, already knew. I was going to say yes. She looked at him. You came to the east fence the first morning. She said. I knew then he had nothing to say to that. So he stood and put water on the stove for Morphe and didn't say anything at all, still trying. And Sena sat at his kitchen table in the morning light, and for the first time in 5 years, the silence in the house felt different. Not empty, just waiting. Bill started before the sun. That was his rule, not because he was trying to be punishing. Because the desert in July was genuinely trying to kill you between the hours of 10 and 4, still trying. And a woman who couldn't shoot straight when she was comfortable was no use to anyone. Sena showed up at the barn at 4:50 in the morning. He had been up since 4. Neither of them mentioned this. He handed her the Colt. Old, reliable, still trying. heavy in a way that forced you to commit to holding it. She took it the way she took everything, without ceremony, without performance. Just looked at it with that inventory-taking quality of hers and then looked at him. Feet shoulder width, he said. Still soft, not locked. You're a spring, not a post. She adjusted both hands. Firm grip. Not strangling it. Breathe in, let half of it out. Don't hold, squeeze, don't pull. On the exhale, she fired, still trying. The shot went 8 feet left of the wooden post he'd set up at 30 yards. Again, he said she fired. 6 feet left, again. 4 feet, again. She was flinching, anticipating the recoil before it happened, still trying, which meant she was pulling the barrel left a fraction of a second before the hammer fell. A very common problem. A problem that felt almost impossible to fix because it was entirely in the mind. Stop thinking, Caleb said. He lowered the gun and looked at him. Stop thinking, he said again. You are anticipating pain that isn't coming. Your body is trying to protect you from a sound. Tell it to stop. How does one tell one's body to stop? Practice. She raised the gun, fired. 2 feet left. Better, still missed. Missing better is still progress. She looked at him sideways. That is a very strange thing to say. It's a very true thing to say. Again, they worked for 3 hours. By the time the sun cleared the eastern ridge, still trying. Sena's arms were shaking and her set in that particular way that said she would stand there until her arms fell off before she asked to stop. He called the break himself, still trying. She sat in the barn shade, drinking from his canteen, and didn't thank him for calling it, which he appreciated. He didn't want gratitude. He wanted someone who would reload and go again. Tomorrow we work on hand-to-hand, he said. She looked up. They get close. The gun doesn't save you. You need to know how to break a man's grip. How to use your weight against his. How to make your dangerous days at zero distance. I can be dangerous at zero distance, I know. Still trying. I saw you face down Draper before I got there. He almost smiled. Almost. That was reckless and it took nerve. My mother used to say courage and stupidity are twins, Sena said. You cannot always tell which is which until after. Your mother was smart. Still trying she was. Sena looked at the canteen. She died of fever the year after my father was killed. She did not try very hard to survive it. He didn't know what to say to that. So he said nothing, which was he was learning, often the right answer with Sena, still trying. I am what remains, she said quietly, not dramatically. Just, as a fact. The way you state a fact that has cost you a great deal and you have decided to stop paying interest on the grief. The barn was quiet. Outside, smoke moved in the corral. Dust drifted. Start again at sundown, Caleb's. When it's cool, Sena nodded, and that was that the days found their shape before dawn, shooting, slow and repetitive and grinding, the way all real learning is. Caleb was not a patient man by nature, still trying. But he had been a soldier, and soldiers learned early that patience in training was the price of survival in the field. So he kept his voice level and his corrections precise, and did not react when she missed, except to say again, did not miss by as much each day. By day 8 she was clipping the edge of the post. By day 12 she was grouping shots in a space the size of his fist at 30 yards. He told her, better, she said. I know. He almost smiled again. He was doing that more than he'd expected. The almost smiling, evenings. Hand to hand. This was different. This was closer. Too close in some ways for two people who were still figuring out what the shape of this arrangement was, still trying. He showed her how to break a wrist grip, how to use an elbow, how to get under a larger opponent's center of gravity and make his own weight work against him. She learned fast, unsettlingly fast. You've done this before, still trying. He said on day 4 of close quarters work, after she used a technique he'd shown her once to put him off balance, in a way that was distinctly not accidental. I grew up in a world where being small and female was a problem I needed to solve, she said, still trying. I solved it. He looked at her. She looked back. Point made afternoons, she taught him. This was not hard part of his original arrangement. It happened incrementally. She would mention something. The way a particular shrub grew indicated water 10 feet below. Still trying. The direction of morning shadow could orient a lost man in country with no landmarks, and he would file it. Then one afternoon she simply started walking and gestured for him to follow. She showed him how to read the canyon like a text. Still trying. Every crack in the rock face told you something. Every animal track told you something. The way the soil compacted differently, where underground water moved, told you something. Still trying. She moved through terrain the way he moved through a crowded room, reading everything at once, assembling it into meaning. He was good at observing people. She was good at observing the world. He thought about that more than he intended. Day 22. The fire had burned down to a low orange glow. The night was warm but not punishing. Stars over Arizona came out like they meant it. No competition from anything. No city light for 100 miles. Just an absolute ceiling of light that made a person feel very small, and somehow not in a bad way. Caleb was on his second cup of coffee, which was a sign that he wasn't planning to sleep soon. Sena was across the fire, not looking at him, looking at the coals. Bill noticed she'd been quieter since midday. Not the usual quiet, which was a working quiet. This was a different kind. The kind that had weight to it. He let it sit for a while. Then, "What?" he said, not rudely, just an opening. Bill's quiet for another moment. "My father," she said. He did not die quickly. He said nothing. Reeves shot him in the chest. He fell, and Reeves stood over him and spoke. I could not hear what was said. But my father, she stopped, did not look at Reeve. He looked at me, across the distance. I was perhaps 30 feet away, behind the supply wagon. He did not know I was there. And then, she paused. He nodded, once. Very small, like he was telling me something. The fire crackled, still trying. What was he telling you? Caleb said that I should stand up. She said it simply. Not immediately. He knew I couldn't do anything immediately. But eventually, she looked at her hands. He died knowing his daughter was watching, still trying. And he made sure the last thing she saw was that he was not afraid. Caleb sat with that, thought, I don't know how to be that kind of man, thought. Actually, I used to know, thought. Stop, Rosie, he said. The name came out before he decided to say it, still trying. Sena looked up. She asked questions all the time, he said. About everything. Why horses have big eyes. Why the sky turns red at night and not in the morning. Why bread rises. He looked at the fire. One morning she asked me why people die. Just out of nowhere. We were feeding the chickens. She asked it, the same way she'd ask about bread. What did you say? I said I'd tell her when she was older. Still silence. That followed was the particular kind that comes when both people in a conversation. What went wrong with the sentence? She never got older, Caleb said. No, and I never got to answer. What would you have told her? He thought about it, still trying. Actually thought about it. For the first time, I'd have told her that things ending is what makes them matter, he said. That if things lasted forever, they'd just be furniture. Part of the background. He turned his cup in his hands, still trying. That the reason it hurt is because it was real, and real things are the only things worth having. Sena was quiet, then. Your wife. What was her laugh like? He looked up fast. You said you weren't ready for that, she said quietly. But I think you are. Tonight, he sat with it. Looked at the coals, and said, loud, completely unself-conscious. You could hear it from the other end of the farm. He almost smiled. Actually smiled. Just barely, but actually. She laughed at her own jokes, still trying. Even when they weren't funny. Especially when they weren't funny. Sena made a small sound. Something adjacent to a laugh. My father used to sing completely wrong words to songs on purpose, she said. Songs he had learned in English. He would change them, still trying. Make them about horses or bad weather, or the particular way certain soldiers rode, as if they had never been on a horse in their life. She shook her head. He was very dignified in all other ways. But his singing was an absolute disaster. Caleb looked at her, still was smiling. A real one. Small and private, pointed at the memory and not at him, and he thought, there she is, under all that precision and control, and iron spine. There is an actual person. He looked away before she caught him looking. Too late. Go to sleep, Caleb Hurst, she said. Her voice had something different in it. Not warmth exactly. Something just before warmth. He went inside, lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Thought, this is going to be a problem. Thought, it already is a problem. Thought, you knew that on day one, and you went to the east fence anyway. He slept better than he had in 5 years. He did not examine this closely. Bill thought he. Seta hit the center of the post. Center, clean hole. 30 yards. Caleb was standing 10 feet behind her. She lowered the gun. Didn't turn around. She turned around. He looked at her. She looked at him. Again, he said, still trying. She raised the gun, hit it again. He walked forward and looked at the post. 2 holes, less than an inch apart. He looked back at her. You've been holding out on me, he said. I have been practicing at night, she said. When you are asleep, stared at her. You've been practicing. At night, alone, with live rounds. Yes, on my property, you gave me the ammunition. I gave you the ammunition for supervised. He stopped, pinched the bridge of his nose. You are going to give me gray hair. Still trying. You already have gray hair, more gray hair, huh? She looked at the 2 holes in the post, with something that was definitely satisfaction. Even if she was trying not to show it, he turned and walked back to the house. She fell into step beside him, still trying. I did not miss once, she said. I know, not once. I heard you the first time. I practiced for 4 hours last. Sena, yes, good work. She stopped walking. He kept walking. Behind him, after a moment he heard her start again, still trying. And he heard, very quietly, clearly not meant for him, a small sound that might have been satisfaction, or might have been the beginning of something else entirely. He kept his face forward. Thought, do not. Thought, absolutely do not. Thought, still trying. She hit the center of the post at 30 yards after 30 days, and you felt it like a no. He kept walking. That was the night they sat up past midnight, and he told her about the army in ways he hadn't told anyone, still trying. And she told him about the 4 years after her father died, when she and her mother moved between camps. Always one step ahead of soldiers who had decided existing was a form of trespassing. Neither of them planned to stay up that late. Neither of them moved to go to bed. When the fire finally died completely, he looked up and realized the eastern sky had gone from black to the very dark shade of purple that came just before gray, and that Sena had, at some point in the past hour, still trying it from sitting across the fire to sitting beside him. Close, not touching, but close in the way that was a choice. He was aware of this in a way that occupied a significant portion of his brain. He did not say anything about it, neither did she, still trying. They watched the sky go purple-gray, then the pale silver that meant 30 minutes until dawn. We should sleep, she said. Probably. Neither of them moved. Caleb? Yes, I am glad you went to the east fence. He sat with that for a moment. Go to sleep, Sena, he said. She stood and walked to her lean-to. He sat by the dead fire for a long time. Thought she sat beside you. Thought there is a version of this where something real happens. Thought, still trying. You are not sure if you are allowed to have something real anymore. Thought. Rosie used to say, Papa, why do you make everything so hard? He stood. Went inside. Didn't sleep. Day 31. Everything shifted, not dramatically. Still trying. Not in a way that announced itself. He was teaching her knife disarmament in the yard. She had his wrist. He was applying pressure. They were moving through the technique at half speed. She got the angle wrong. He corrected it, put his hand over hers to show the position. She adjusted and they were just still, for a moment, his hand over hers. Neither of them moving. He let go. Stepped back, said again. She said nothing. Just looked at him for a half second. That lasted considerably longer than a half second. Scenes of them spoke it's about. But something had shifted. The quality of the air between them was different after that. Not worse. Not awkward, exactly. Just aware. Still trying. That night he didn't go to the fire. She didn't either. He thought very firmly about fence repairs and firearms maintenance for approximately 45 minutes. Then he got up and went to the fire. She was already there. Of course she was. Still trying. I was going to sleep, he said. So was I, she said. He sat down. They didn't talk much. But she was there, and he was there. And the night was very large around them. And somewhere in it, still trying, in the warmth of the fire and the particular silence of two people who had stopped pretending they were only training partners, something became true that had been becoming true for 31 days. Still trying. Day 35, the horizon filled with dust before noon. Caleb saw it from the barn roof. A thick brown cloud, the kind that a lot of horses moving fast, coming from the direction of the main road. He counted 23 riders, all in militia gray. Still trying. Reeve in the center, straight, unhurried, the posture of a man who had never once doubted that the world was going to arrange itself the way he wanted. Caleb came down from the roof. They're here, he said. Sena was in the yard. She had them already. She was checking the revolver with hands that were completely steady, loading chambers, clicking the cylinder, her face carrying the same expression she wore when she was about to shoot at a target. Focused. Clear. Still trying. He had taught her that. Or she had always had it, and he had given her something to aim it at. He pulled her toward the house. The charges are set. You remember the placement. 20 feet from the gate post, 40 feet from the barn door. Still trying. Under the dry creek bed. Wire is in the kitchen. Left of the door. I know where the wire is, Caleb. If we have to go to the tunnel. I know the tunnel, Sena. She looked at him. He looked at her. Thought. There are things I have not said. Thought. Still trying. I am running out of time. Don't say them. Thought. Later. Say them later. Survive first. Stay behind the interior wall, he said. He went to the window. She went to the door. Reeve pulled his horse to a stop 40 yards from the porch. His men fanned out. Military formation. Like a net being cast, Mr. Hurst. You made the wrong choice. Caleb opened the window. No, you don't. A pause. You're right, Reeve said. I don't. Surrender the woman. Last time, no. Reeve raised one hand. Sena, Caleb said. Still trying. The explosion enormous. It came up from under the dry creek bed in a column of dirt and fire, and noise that knocked two riders from their horses before the sound even finished happening. The shockwave rattled every window. Dust billowed through the gaps in the wall. Caleb was already firing before it settled. Calm, measured shots, picking targets, center mass, exhale and squeeze, and across the room he could hear Sena's revolver answering in a different rhythm. Faster, shorter, her own cadence, the one she'd built in 30 days of practice. The militia scattered, horses screaming, men shouting. Caleb fired until the Winchester was empty, dropped it, picked up the second rifle, kept firing, still trying. Sena hit a man trying to flank the house from the east, then another from the west. She had stopped counting her shots and started reading the field. The target isn't the man. The target is the gap between you and surviving. She understood it now, still trying. Reeves' voice rose above the chaos. Reform, push forward. He was regrouping. Maybe 10 men still mounted. Reeve himself had pulled back to the ridge, directing from elevation. Smart and infuriating, tunnel, Caleb said. She was already moving, still trying. The cellar smelled like earth and old wood, and the particular cool that exists underground even when the world above is burning. And the world above was burning. They could hear it. The house he had built, board by board, over 3 years, still trying. The porch where he'd sat with bad coffee and worse thoughts for 1,000 mornings. The kitchen where she had told him things that rearranged his understanding of his own life. Burning, Caleb crouched at the tunnel entrance. Rifle ready, stay behind me in the tunnel, I know. If I go down, you will not go down, Sena. You will not go down, she said again. Firm. Not hopeful. Certain, and if you do, I will certainly not leave you there. So let's agree you will not go down. Looked at her in the dark, thought, she is the most infuriating person I have ever met. Thought, also possibly the most extraordinary. Thought, both of those things are completely true at the same time. Go, he said. She went. He followed, still trying. 20 feet of tunnel, hands and knees, dirt falling from the ceiling, with every boot that hit the floor above. The sound of the fire was louder down here than he'd expected, a low roar that pressed through the earth like a living thing. Still trying. They reached the exit. Caleb lifted the wooden cover 1 inch. The barn, untouched. The militia had gathered near the burning house, watching the fire with the settled posture of men who thought they'd won. 15 still standing, down from 23, still trying. Reeve was apart from the others, arms crossed staring at the flames. Caleb looked at Sena. She was already looking at him. Horses, he said. Corral, on my move. He pushed the cover open, came out low, moving through the scrub, staying below the line of the barn wall. She was beside him. Silent. Fast, her footfalls barely audible. He stepped around the barn corner and opened fire. The first shot dropped a man on the far left. The second caught a man reaching for his horse, still trying. Sena was already firing from the right, and the militia was scattering in 2 directions at once. Because a man cannot run 2 ways at the same time, they fought back fast. Return fire tore chunks from the barn wall, still trying. A round went through the space where Caleb's head had been a half-second earlier. There are too many, Sena called. She was right, horses. Now, they sprinted. The corral was 40 yards. Felt like 400. Bullets in the dirt behind them, still trying. One clipped the top of the fence rail as Caleb vaulted it. He cut Smoke's tether with his knife. She was already moving. Sena was on the roan before Caleb was fully on Smoke. They went through the corral gate at a full gallop. Reeves' voice behind them, still trying. After them, but the militia's horses were scattered by the fire, nervous and half-wild, and by the time they mounted up, Caleb and Sena were already into the scrub in the desert and the dark. They rode for an hour without stopping, till the sound of pursuit faded, until the only sounds were hoofbeats and wind, and their own breathing. When Caleb finally pulled Smoke to a walk, they were in the canyon country. Red walls on both sides, a particular deep silence of a place that had never cared about human trouble and did not intend to start. He heard Sena pull up beside him. Looked over, she was breathing hard, soot on her face. Her right sleeve was dark. You're bleeding, he said, still trying. I know, how long, since the barn. He was off Smoke before she finished the sentence. He found the wound in the light of a match. Her upper arm, a graze that had taken a strip of skin and left a deep furrow. Not lethal, still trying, but bleeding seriously, and she had ridden an hour on it without saying a word. Why didn't you tell me? You would have stopped. Yes, we could not stop. He was tearing his shirt into strips. His hands were not entirely steady. His hands were always steady. It was known, once known among people who had known him, for the absolute steadiness of his hands under pressure. They were not steady now. Hold still, he said. I am holding still, hold stiller, hold stiller. She held stiller. He wrapped the wound tight. Didn't make a sound. When he finished, he didn't step back. He was kneeling beside her where she'd sat against a rock, and his hands were on her arm, and they were very close, and the canyon was very dark. Caleb, she said. Quietly. He looked up, was looking at him, not with the inventory-taking look, not with the measuring look. Something else. Something open. He sat back on his heels, thought, this is not the moment, thought, she is injured and we are being hunted, thought, still trying. Also, she is looking at you like that, thought. She has been looking at you like that for longer than tonight. We need to make camp, he said. His voice came out lower, less steady. Yes, she said. Neither of them moved, still trying. The canyon opens about half a mile north, he said. There's an overhang. Good shelter, all right. We need to water the horses, yes, and build a fire. Small. No smoke. I know, and you need to eat something because you've lost blood. And Caleb, still trying, she said. Yes, I know. A pause. I know too, he said, which was not a sentence with a clear grammatical object. But she understood it. He could tell by the way something shifted in her face. Not surprise, not relief, just, yes. That he stood, still trying, offered his hand. She took it and stood. They walked the horses north through the dark canyon. Neither of them spoke. But there was something between them now that had not been there before. Not new, exactly, just, admitted, still trying. They began her hang, made camp, small fire, no smoke. She showed him which dried plants burned with the least visibility, still trying. He made food, hardtack and dried meat, and 2 wild onions she found near the rock shadow, with what he was starting to recognize as an absolutely unreasonable instinct for useful plants. They ate. They did not talk much, still trying. The night was very large, and the canyon was very quiet, and Caleb Hurst sat across from a woman he had met 35 days ago and thought, what is this? What is this? Exactly. Because it was not what he had planned. He had planned a transaction, still trying. Information for training, a clear arrangement. He had not planned the east fence. Had not planned the coffee. Had not planned 35 nights by a fire, talking about things he hadn't talked about in years to anyone. Still not. Planned the way she laughed, quietly, privately, pointed at the memory and not at the audience. He had not planned any of this, still trying. And now his house was ash, and Reeve was still out there, and they were hiding in a canyon with 2 rifles and approximately 30 rounds between them. He looked at her across the fire. Tell me something true, he said. She looked up, something you haven't told anyone. About what you want, not for the band, not for the future, for yourself. She was quiet for a moment. I want, she said slowly, to be somewhere long enough that I know which way the light falls in the morning. Still trying. She looked at the fire. I have not been in one place long enough for that in 14 years. I want to know which window the morning comes through. I want to have a window. He sat with that. I want to answer a question, he said. She looked at him. Rosie asked me why things die, he said, and I told her I'd tell her when she was older. I want to answer the question, out loud, to someone. Sena waited. Things die, he said, because they're real, and real things have edges, endings. Still trying. He looked at his hands. But the realness is the whole point. It's what makes them matter. It's what makes you feel something when you lose them. Silence. That is a good answer, Sena said. 5 years too late. No. She shook her head. Bill understood it now. She would have understood it now. When you were ready to say it, she looked at him. She would have understood it. Because you are saying it out loud for the first, which means you have finally let yourself understand it. He looked at her, looked at him, and in the dark of the canyon, the night very large, and the fire very small, still trying. Something became the only thing it had been moving, toward becoming, since a woman appeared at his corral fence carrying the truth about his family, an open coffee pot, and an amount of patience that no one had any right to have. 3 days north, still trying. That was the distance to the Chiricahua band. They rode it carefully, changing direction, doubling back. The techniques they'd taught each other applied now with complete seriousness because Reeve's scouts would be out, and they both knew it. They found 2 of them dead in a dry wash on the 2nd day. Apache arrows. Caleb crouched beside the closer body. Sena studied the fletching. Gaho, she said, my uncle. He's already moving. How many men does he have? 12. 15. The young ones are fighting. Caleb stood, looked north, and Reeve still has 15, maybe 18. We will need a better plan than numbers, I know. I have one. She looked at him. Raven Pass, he said. Tell me about it. Told him about Raven Pass. He listened, and as she talked, the height of the walls, the width of the bottleneck, the places where a man could sit invisible on a rock face and see everything below, He felt the soldier in him waking up, still trying. Not the broken version. The original, the one that had known how to think 3 moves ahead. The one that had been asleep for 5 years under a ranch that wasn't really a home, waiting for something worth waking up for. He was awake now, still trying. The Apache camp appeared from nowhere. One moment there was canyon and scrub and silence. The next moment there were people, 30 of them, still trying, emerging from the rocks and the shadows with the absolute unhurried calm of a people who had been doing this for a very long time. An older man came forward, 60, maybe older, still trying. Lean and quiet in the way of men who had lost a great deal and organized themselves around what was left. He looked at Sena with something that was not quite relief, too controlled for that, but was the very architecture of relief beneath the discipline, still trying. Then he looked at Caleb. Caleb had been looked at by men deciding whether to trust him before. He had never been looked at quite like this, Gaho, Sena said, and spoke in Chiricahua, fast and serious. The old man listened, didn't move, was going occasionally to Caleb with an expression specifically calibrated to reveal nothing whatsoever. When Sena finished, Gaho spoke once. Short. Sena translated. He says you can stay. He does not say he trusts you. Fair enough, Caleb said. Gaho studied him for another moment, then looked at Sena and said something else. Sena's expression shifted very slightly. What? Caleb said. He says you look at me the way men look at their wives. Still trying. And he wants to know if you have the sense to admit it, or if you are going to be difficult about it. Caleb stood very still. Thought. That is not what I expected him to say. Thought. Also, he is not wrong. Thought. Still trying. He is absolutely not wrong, and that is a very uncomfortable thing to be standing here thinking in front of an old man who can apparently read a situation like the back of his own hand. Caleb looked at Gaho. I'm working on the difficult part, he said. Gaho looked at him for a moment. Then, very slightly, he smiled and turned to walk toward the camp. Sena fell into step beside Caleb. He likes you, she said. He smiled at me like I was a slow horse. That is how Gaho likes people, she said. Well, Caleb Hurst walked into the Chiricahua camp. Not as a guest. Not exactly, as a man who had been walking toward a place without knowing it and had arrived. That night Gaho brought out the box, small, dark wood, still trying. Carried with the specific care of something kept a long time at considerable personal cost. He set it on the ground between himself and Caleb, opened it, inside letters. 14 of them, some in good condition, some nearly falling apart at the folds, all in English. All handwritten with the uneven pressure of men writing quickly, in poor light, perhaps afraid of being seen writing at all. Caleb picked up the first one, read it, then the second, then the third, names, dates, locations, settlements burned, orders given, money paid, land purchased within months of the burning at prices that required the previous occupants to be dead or moved or otherwise absent from the transaction. Salina, Kansas. July 14, 1873, there it was, still trying, in a man named Corporal Olin Briggs's handwriting, shaky, written on the back of a supply manifest. The order, the colonel's voice giving it, the lanterns going up, the houses going down, and a notation, very small, at the bottom. There was a child in the east field. I saw her. I did not go back, I heard. The writing stopped there. Caleb set the letter down, sat for a long time in the dark. Gaho sat across from him, not speaking, not filling the silence, just witnessing, still trying. Finally, Caleb looked up. Why did you keep these? He said. Gaho's English was slow and deliberate and completely precise. Because the truth has weight, he said. And the wrong people should carry it? Caleb looked at the box. I need a white man, still trying, he said. Not bitterly, just as a fact, to take these to court. A white man with standing, with a reason, with something they can't dismiss. Yes, Gaho said. You were waiting for someone. Gaho looked at him, still trying. I was waiting for someone with a reason to not stop, he said. Reasons that come from outside run out. Reasons that come from, he touched his chest. Those do not run out. Caleb thought about Clara, about Rosie, about 5 years of ash, still trying. About Sena saying, you have been standing in ash when you could have been building something. All right, Caleb said. All right, Gaho said. And they sat together in the dark and began to plan, still trying. The plan for Raven Pass came together over 2 days. Caleb and Gaho and 4 senior warriors crouched over a map scratched in the dirt, still trying, arguing with gestures and broken shared language, and Sena translating the gaps and occasionally inserting her own opinions with a firmness that brooked zero discussion. She was right every time she did it. No one this out loud, still trying. Everyone adjusted their plans accordingly. Caleb knew the pass from the militia side, how Reeve thought, how he moved his men, where he'd put his flankers. The Apache knew the pass from the inside, every ledge, every shadow, still trying, every crack in the rock, face wide enough for a man to wedge himself into and wait. The plan was brutal, the plan was simple. Caleb stands in the center of the pass. Alone, unarmed in appearance, draws Reeve in. When the militia is committed to the bottleneck, still trying. When there is no clean way out, the walls come down. Literally, Gaho's men had positioned boulders at the southern exit of the pass. 4 days ago, held with ropes, waiting, you understand? Gaho said to Caleb on the evening before, still trying, that you are the thing they are shooting at. Yes. Standing still, yes. Until they are close enough, yes. Gaho looked at him. Brave or foolish, the old man said. Caleb thought about what Sena's mother had said. Both, he said, still trying. Gaho made the sound that was his version of a laugh. That night Sena found Caleb at the edge of camp, sitting with his back against a juniper tree looking at the stars. She sat beside him, close, still trying. The closeness that was a choice and had been a choice for some time now. You don't have to be the one standing in the open, she said. It has to be me. Reeve will advance on a white man in a way he won't advance on. I know the reason. Still trying. I said you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Silence. Caleb, yes, I am going to tell you something. He waited. I am expecting a child, she said. I believe it has been perhaps 3 weeks. Since, she stopped, still trying. Since the night after you called a draw on the fire practice and I made the terrible coffee. The night was very still. He turned and looked at her. She was looking straight ahead.
Not avoiding his eyes?
That wasn't a thing Sena did.
Just
giving him a moment to absorb it before she had to absorb his reaction. 3 weeks. Which meant, how long have you known, he said. A few days. And you didn't. I was deciding how to tell you. He sat with this. The canyon, the fire, the stars, still trying. The plan for tomorrow where he stood in the open and let 20 men ride toward him. Sena, do not change the plan, she said. I wasn't going to say. You were about to say something about changing the plan. He closed his mouth. He had been, still trying. She turned and looked at him then. Full, direct. I came to you with a request, she said. And then something else happened that was not the request. And I know that, and you know that, and she stopped. I am telling you because you deserve to know. Still trying. Not because I expect anything. Not because I want you to, Sena, change everything or make promises in the dark before a battle. Sena, she stopped. I'm not changing the plan, he said. And I'm not making promises in the dark. Her jaw tightened slightly, still trying. But I'm going to be here, he said. After be here, she looked at him. That's a promise, she said. Yes, in the dark, yes, before a battle. Yes, she was quiet. Then, all right, still trying. He put his hand over hers on the ground between them. She turned her hand over. They sat like that under the stars of Arizona territory. In the canyon that was almost home, while the boulders at Raven Pass waited in the dark for morning and Caleb Hurst thought, still alive in here. She was right about that. From the very first day, she was right. Still trying. Raven Pass at dawn. The light came in sideways, thin and cold, cutting along the top of the east wall and leaving the floor of the pass in shadow for another 20 minutes, which was exactly what they needed. Caleb stood in the center of the pass, alone, no rifle visible, hands loose at his sides. Just a man standing in the middle of a canyon like he had nowhere better to be. Which was not entirely untrue. Above him, invisible, Gaho's warriors had been in position since before midnight. 12 men, still wedged into cracks in the rock face, flat against ledges. Still in the specific way of people who had learned stillness as a survival skill and not a meditation practice. He could not see a single one of them. That was the point behind him, still trying. At the northern exit, Sena waited with 3 younger warriors. Her role was containment. If anyone broke through, she was the line. He had told her to stay back. She had looked at him. He had stopped telling her things. The sound came first. Hoofbeats, the particular rhythm of a formed military column, moving at a controlled pace, deliberate, confident. Caleb breathed. In, half out, don't hold. Reeve appeared at the south end of the pass. Riding point, still trying. 18 men behind him in a column that narrowed as they entered the bottleneck. The walls closed around them. The pass compressed them from 20 feet wide to 12, then 10. And they kept coming, still trying, because there was a man standing in the middle of the pass looking at them. And men like Reeve advanced on things that looked like problems to be solved. Reeve pulled his horse to a stop 20 yards out. Looked at Caleb, looked at the walls, looked at Caleb again. Something moved behind his eyes. Fast, almost too fast to catch, he raised his hand. Column halt, the horses stopped. 18 men and horses standing in the narrowest part of a canyon with walls 60 feet high on both sides, exactly where they needed to be. Mr. Hurst, Reeve said. His voice was very controlled. "Colonel," Caleb said, "this is a surprise, is it?" Reeve looked at the walls again, slow, methodical, the eyes of a military man reading terrain, reading it wrong, still trying, because the Apache had been in those rocks for 8 hours, and they had left no sign that a man trained in militia tactics would know how to find. "You should walk away," Reeve said. "Right now, while you still can." "I've been walking away for 5 years," Caleb said. "I'm done." Sentiment, evidence. Caleb reached into his coat, slowly, no sudden movement, pulled out a single folded paper, one of Briggs's letters, the one with Sena on it, the one with Clara settlement and the date and the order in Reeve's name. Held it up. "Evidence, Colonel. 14 letters. Names, dates, orders traceable to you. Land transactions that follow your burn pattern, like footprints in snow. Collected over 4 years by people you assumed couldn't read and wouldn't be believed." Reeve's face. Something shifted in it. Not fear. Reeve was not afraid of a piece of paper. But something. "That document is worthless," Reeve said. "Whoever wrote it, still trying." "Corporal Olin Briggs," Caleb said. "He writes about Salina, Kansas. July 14th, 1873. He writes about a child in the Eastfield." He looked at Reeve. "My daughter's name was Rosie. She was 4 years old. It had a wooden horse. Her grandfather carved for her. Silence in the pass. 18 horses. 18 men. None of them moving. I'm going to take these letters to Judge Harlan Foss in Prescott," Caleb said, still trying. "And I'm going to stand in his courtroom and say everything I just said. With a witness who was on the ridge that night and can identify your uniform and your formation." He held Reeve's gaze. "You can try to stop me," still trying. "Or you can turn your horses around and I will find you in court instead of here." Reeve sat very still. "Then, kill him," and the pass exploded. The ropes cut. 300 pounds of sandstone boulder at the south exit. Let go all at once. The sound of it was enormous. A grinding roar that swallowed the first volley of gunfire completely. Men and horses screaming. The south end of the pass sealed in 4 seconds. Apache rifles from both walls. Still trying. Caleb dropped flat and rolled behind a boulder and came up firing with the pistol he'd had at his back. Working fast, picking targets, the way he had been trained and had tried to forget and could not forget, because that kind of training did not man. Just waited. The pass, horses with nowhere to go, men trying to dismount, trying to return fire at targets they could not see. The canyon walls amplified every shot into something that sounded like a continuous explosion. No beginning, no end, still trying. Just noise and smoke, and the terrible efficiency of an ambush executed by people who had been surviving against impossible odds their whole lives and were very tired of losing. Caleb moved through the smoke looking for Reeve, still trying. Found him at the north end of the pass, his horse down, on his feet, pistol up, directing the remnant of his men with the iron control of a man who had been in bad situations before and was not yet finished. 3 men still with him, still trying. Backs against the canyon wall. Caleb stepped out of the smoke. Reeve raised his pistol. Caleb raised his 12 feet between them. "It's done," Caleb said. "Nothing is done," Reeve said. "Nothing is ever done. You kill me. They send someone else, I know, still trying. But they send someone else without your land records, without your contacts. Without 14 years of built infrastructure." He kept his voice level. "We take the letters to Foss. The pattern becomes public record," still trying. "The next man who tries this has to start over and that buys time," Reeve said. "That's all. Time is all anyone ever gets." Reeve looked at him. Something in his face. Not surrender, but the recognition, still trying, in a man who was genuinely intelligent, that the board had changed, that the pieces were no longer where he'd placed them. His hand moved, not toward Caleb, sideways, toward the canyon wall, toward the gap in the rock where a man might. Sena stepped out of the shadows. Rifle up. Reeve stopped. Sena looked at him the way she looked at targets. Clear, focused. "No performance in it. My father's name was Casa," she said, still trying. "You shot him in the chest and stood over him while he died. He did not look at you. He looked at his daughter. Because you were not worth his last moment." Reeve stared at her. "You are not worth mine either," she said, and shot him. Not in the chest. Shoulder. His gun arm. Spinning him against the canyon wall. The pistol dropping. Reeve sliding down, leaving a red streak on the stone. His face. For the first time, losing its certainty. Becoming something smaller. Still trying. Something that had not been certain it could bleed. He sat on the ground and breathed and did not try to get up. His 3 remaining men put their hands up. Gaho's warriors down from the walls. The pass went quiet. Philip walked to where Reeve sat and looked down at him. "Court," he said. "Harlan Foss. Prescott. If you survived the ride." Reeve looked up at him. blood soaking through his uniform. That pale gray gaze, still trying to calculate even now, still trying. "You think this matters," Reeve said. "I think it does," Caleb said. "And I think you're starting to think it might too." He walked away. Found Sena. She was lowering the rifle. Her hands were not shaking, still trying. Her face was something that was not peace and not satisfaction, but was what came after a very long carrying of something very heavy. The moment of putting it down. "How's the arm?" he said. "Fine. Your other arm?" "Also fine." "Sena." "Caleb. Are you still trying?" she said. And looked at if are you? He thought about it. Honestly thought about it. Yes, which surprised him. Which was the right answer. Still trying. Dax was taken 11 days later. They were back at the Chiricahua camp, rebuilding, regrouping, sending word through channels Gaho had cultivated over decades toward Judge Foss in Prescott. Still trying. Caleb was teaching a morning session with 3 of the younger warriors. When the scouting party came back short, 4 had gone out. 3 came back. Caleb counted before they finished dismounting. Fort Crail. New garrison. Captain Aldrich, commanding. Still trying. Dax had been separated in a patrol encounter on the South Trail. Taken, alive, as far as the scouts could tell. A letter arrived the next morning by Ryder. White flag. Aldrich's seal. The terms were simple. Caleb Hurst surrendered himself to Fort Crail by sundown. Dax released unharmed. No negotiation. Caleb read the letter once. Folded it. "I'm going," he said. "Sena." "No, he's 16 years old. Still trying. And you have a child coming, and a trial to testify at, and 14 letters that need to reach Prescott, and Sena." "No, he trusted me." She stared at him. "He trusted me to teach him something worth knowing," Caleb said. "I can't let him pay for that." Still trying. "Caleb, if they take you, they won't kill me. They want me at trial. Aldrich wants a spectacle, not a body." He held her gaze. "I'll walk in. And if I can't negotiate, you and Gaho get me out. That is not a plan. It's the beginning of one." He grabbed his arm and said very quietly, very precisely, "Come back." He looked at her hand on his arm. Looked at her. "I will," he said, and left before sunrise. Alone, Fort Crail was sandstone and raw timber, still smelling of sawdust and ambition. Still trying. The kind of fort built by men who planned to stay somewhere a long time and wanted the land to understand that Caleb rode in with his hands visible. They had rifles on him before he cleared the gate. Captain Aldrich was younger than he'd expected. 35, maybe. Neat uniform. The particular composed expression of a man who had decided before the conversation that he was going to win it. They put Caleb in a cell before he finished asking about Dax's stone floor. 6 by 8. Still trying. One barred window too high to reach. He thought, Dax is here somewhere. He thought, Sena knows this fort's layout from the scouts. He thought, Gaho has done more with less. He thought, hold. Aldrich came at mid-morning, stood outside the cell, precise. Still trying. Hands clasped his back. "Mr. Hurst, you are charged with murder, conspiracy, harboring hostiles, and obstruction of territorial militia operations. The trial is in Prescott. 3 weeks. And the Apache boy." Aldrich's face did not change, but still trying. "He attempted to escape last night. He was shot during the attempt. He did not survive. The cell was very quiet. I thought you should know," Aldrich said. Given your obvious attachment, he walked away. His boots were very precise on the stone floor. Still trying. And Caleb sat in the silence of the cell. This was the silence that comes when a thing you were holding is taken from you, and you have been here before. You have been exactly here before. Different room, different name. Still trying. Same sensation of the world removing something from your hands before you were finished. He put his back against Stostwall. Thought, Dax. Thought, 16 years old. Thought, he was learning to read. He was practicing the letters in the dirt. It was getting faster. He was going to be somebody who used words instead of. He stopped thinking. He sat on the stone floor, and for the first time since the ranch burned, Caleb Hurst did not stand back up right away. He just sat in the dark, still trying, in the weight of it. Because some things deserve a moment before you find the next move. Because grief is not weakness. Because Rosie deserved a moment too once, and he never gave her one. He gave her 5 years of not thinking, which is not the same thing. This time he sat with it for a full hour, and then he stood up. They moved him 3 nights later, wagon to Prescott, 6 mounted guards, night travel to avoid the heat. Caleb was in chains, still trying. He focused on counting the guards' positions and the wagon speed and the particular quality of the road surface under the wheels. An hour out of Fort Crail, the Fur Crail. The first shot, one of the mounted guards went sideways off his horse before the sound finished, still trying. The second shot took another before anyone understood what was happening. The remaining guards spun their horses, rifles up. firing at darkness, at the canyon walls that had absorbed 12 Apache warriors like they'd been made of air. The wagon hit a rock and went sideways. Caleb grabbed the side rail and the world turned over. He hit the ground, rolled, came to rest face down in the dust. Alive, bruised, not broken. He turned over. Gaho stood over him with a knife. The old man crouched and cut through the chain links with a blade made for exactly this purpose. "You are a very stupid man," Gaho said. "I've been told Dax is alive." Caleb went very still. "Aldrich lied," Gaho said. "The boy is back at camp." Bruised, still trying, angry. Alive, the relief was physical, actual physical, like a weight leaving his body that he had not known he was carrying until it was gone. He sat up. "Aldrich wanted to break you before the trial," Gaho said. "Make you give up the letters." Still trying. "Make you recant." "Did it work?" Gaho asked. Caleb stood, took stock of himself. The bruises, the road dust, the place in his chest where he'd sat for an hour and let the grief be what it was. "No," he said. Gaho handed him a rifle. Still trying, and they walked into the dark. Still trying. Prescott. They rode in on a Tuesday morning in late September. Caleb. Sena. 5 months along now, carrying herself the same way she carried everything, with a straightness of spine that dared the world to comment. The town stared. Of course it stared. Still trying. A white man and a visibly pregnant Apache woman riding down Main Street with the specific posture of people who had decided in advance that they were not going to be deterred. Someone said something from a doorway. Caleb did not turn his head. Still trying. Sena did not turn her head. They rode to the courthouse and dismounted and walked in. Still trying. Judge Harlan Foss was 67 years old and had the face of a man who had been disappointed by the law's application so many times that he had organized his entire life around applying it correctly himself. He read all 14 letters, every word, still trying, without interruption, without expression. When he finished, he set them down and looked at Caleb. "These are serious documents." "Yes, if authenticated," Foss said carefully. Still trying. "They implicate a commissioned officer and 4 associated officials in murder and criminal land fraud." He looked at Sena. "You, the witness who was present in Salina." "Yes," Sena said. "You understand your testimony will be contested." "Yes." Still strenuously. "Yes. By men with considerably more institutional support than you have." "Judge Foss," Sena said, with a patience that had been tested considerably over the past several months and had not broken. Still trying. "I have been contesting men with more institutional support than me since I was 17 years old. I am not new to this." Foss looked at her for a moment. Then at Caleb. "I'll convene a grand jury. We'll review the evidence. If there's sufficient basis," still trying, "we proceed to trial." He stood. "You'll need somewhere to stay. There will be a warrant for your arrest from Fort Crail. I'll issue a counterorder through the territorial court, but until it's processed." "I understand," Caleb said. "Do you have somewhere safe?" "We'll manage," Sena said. They managed. The room above Whitmore's dry goods was small, smelled like seats and old flour sacks, and it was theirs for $3 a week. First night. Someone threw a rock through the window. Caleb boarded it up with a cedar plank. Didn't say anything. Went back to bed. Second night. Quiet. Third night. 3 men followed Caleb from the courthouse, built around, and looked at them, and they assessed each other. For a long moment, and then the men left. Caleb had a particular way of looking at people that communicated certain information efficiently. The weeks passed. Sena testified, still trying. She sat in the witness chair with her hands folded on the railing and answered every question with the same precise clarity she brought to everything. When the defense lawyers tried to undermine her background, still bias, she responded each time with a fact, just a fact, exact, unadorned, the kind of answer that was very difficult to argue with because it contained no emotion to attack. Caleb testified. He sat in the same chair and talked about Selena, still trying, about Clara, about Rosie and the wooden horse, about the burn pattern he'd seen in the reports that didn't match Apache methods. About 5 years of questions. His voice was level the entire time, still trying, because he had sat on a stone floor in a cell for 1 hour and actually felt what he needed to feel, and after that the words were just words. And then, on the 4th day of testimony, the door of the courtroom opened. He was 58 years old, bent, still trying, thin in the way of a man whose body was completing a long argument with itself and losing. He walked with a cane, and the particular careful movement of someone in chronic pain who had decided to be somewhere anyway. He sat down in the gallery, and then, still trying, when the defense finished their morning cross-examination, he stood. Judge Foss looked at him. "I have testimony," the man said. "Voluntary. Relevant to the matter before the court. The defense objected. Foss overruled. The man came to the witness stand. His name was Olin Briggs, former corporal, United States Army, Arizona Territorial Militia, seconded 1871 to 1874. He had a letter in his pocket, his own letter, the one Gaho had kept for 4 years, still trying. He had recognized it when Foss read the exhibit numbers into the record, and he had taken 3 days to decide what to do about that. He had taken a train from Tucson. He stood at the witness stand and held the rail with both hands and looked at Caleb. Not at the judge, not at the jury. At Caleb, I was there, he said. Selena, July 14th, I did not carry the lantern, but I stood at the perimeter and I held the line and I listened. He stopped. His jaw worked, still trying. I heard the woman go back into the house. I heard the child in the field calling for her. I did not move. I had my orders and I did not move. The courtroom was very quiet. I have been hearing that child for 4 years, Briggs said. I came here because I am not a young man, and I would like to stop hearing her. He looked at Caleb. Your daughter's name, he said. What was it, Rosie? Caleb said. Briggs nodded. Once. Slowly, Rosie, he said quietly. Was putting the name somewhere specific, somewhere it would stay. He sat down. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need 3 officers. Guilty, conspiracy, criminal land fraud, conduct resulting in civilian deaths, Eldritch, pending investigation, formal charges to follow 6 associated officials, acquitted, insufficient direct evidence. Their lawyers were very good, and justice was imperfect, and always had been, and always would be. And Caleb Hurst stood on the courthouse steps in the October sun and accepted this as a fact of being alive in the actual world, and not a story. Still trying. Convicted. Reeves' name in the public record. Selena in the public record. Clara and Rosie in the public record. Not erased. Not convenient. Not ash. Real. Permanent. Which was, in the end, what he had needed. Still trying. Sena stood beside him on the steps. The crowd below was split. Some people cheering, some shouting, some simply standing and watching, with expressions that said the world had just demonstrated its capacity to be complicated again. Caleb raised one hand. The crowd quieted enough. I'm not a hero, he said, clearly, without performance. I'm a man who got tired of running from the truth. That's all any of this was. He paused. The truth matters, not because it fixes things, because it's true. Still trying. And true things deserve to be said out loud. He took Sena's hand. They walked down the steps. The baby came a night in late November, cold for Arizona. The kind of cold that made the stars very sharp and the silence very absolute. Caleb paced the narrow hallway outside Dr. Hendrix's door. He was not good at pacing. He did it anyway, back and forth, counting the boards. 17 boards from the door to the window. 17 back. 17. 17. Still trying. At some point Dax appeared at the end of the hallway, sat down on the floor with his back against the wall. Caleb looked at him. What are you doing here? Caleb said. Waiting, Dax said. You didn't have to come, I know. It's the middle of the night. Still trying. I know. Caleb looked at the boy, 16 years old. Something in his face that had been young a few months ago and was not quite as young now. The particular aging that happens when you have been genuinely afraid and survived it. Sit down, Dax said. Still trying. I'm fine. You have been walking for 9 hours. I'm fine, Caleb. He sat down on the floor next to Dax. They sat against the wall in the hallway. Dax. She will be all right, Caleb said. You don't know that, Dax said. I know she is Sena. Still trying. Which was, Caleb thought, a completely sufficient argument. He waited. 17 boards from the door to the window, and then a sound different from the sounds that had been coming through the door for 9 hours. A new sound, high, clear, still trying. Outraged, in the particular way of something that has arrived and has opinions about it. Caleb was on his feet before he knew he'd stood. Dr. Hendrix opened the door. Tired, still smiling. With the specific smile of someone who has just been part of a thing that never stops being extraordinary, no matter how many times they witness it. A daughter. Hendrix said. Both doing well. Caleb walked in. Sena was in the bed, exhausted in a way that was total and absolute. The exhaustion of someone who has gone to the very edge of what a body can do and returned. But her eyes were open, and they were the clearest he had ever seen them. No inventory, no measuring, no control, just herself. Completely, she was holding a small thing wrapped in white cloth. Dark hair, barely visible, fingers so small they seemed like they should not be capable of existing. One of those fingers curled around Sena's. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, still trying. He looked at his daughter. She looked at nothing in particular, in the way of very new people still deciding what looking was. She needs a name, Sena said. Her voice was rough and quiet. Caleb looked at her, then at the baby, still trying. Thought about the name he'd been carrying around for 5 years. Thought about a wooden horse and a laugh that carried across a farm, and a woman who went back. Thought about Sena's mother, still trying, who taught her daughter to speak well so she could not be made invisible, who kept singing in the dark years after everything went wrong. Amma, he said. Sena's eyes filled. She didn't let any of it spill over, because she was Sena. But her eyes filled, still trying. And she looked at her daughter with an expression that was every long year and every carrying and every choosing to keep going gathered into one moment. Amma, she said softly, the name settled. Stayed Dad. Dax appeared in the doorway, still trying, looked at the three of them, made a face that was trying very hard not to be moved and was absolutely failing. She is very small, he said. Babies are small, Caleb said. She looks like Sena. Good. She has your ears, though. Get out of this room, Dax. Still grinned. Disappeared. Caleb looked at Sena. She looked at him, and that was all. That was the whole of it. Two people looking at each other on the other side of everything they had come through, in a room that smelled like cedar and clean linen, and the particular indefinable smell of new life. No words required. Nothing left to prove or explain or convince. Just there, both of them. 1 year later, autumn, 1879. Still trying. Caleb Hurst stood on the porch of the house in Prescott, not a ranch, not a place to wait, an actual house with a window that caught the morning light in a way that meant something to the woman inside, and watched the sun clear the Bradshaw Mountains. His badge was on his belt. Territorial Marshal. Judge Foss had been persistent about it. Had said, the territory needs men who believe in justice and not just law. Had said it 3 times before Caleb stopped arguing. He had stopped arguing, still trying. From inside the house, the sound of Dax reading aloud. They had established the morning reading rule 6 months ago. 1 page a day, out loud. It'll build the specific confidence that came from hearing your own voice say difficult words and discovering you could say them. He was on chapter 7 of a book about land law, his choice, which said something about the kind of man Dax was becoming, which with its Tahoe came around the side of the house. He was carrying a cup of coffee. He sat down in the chair Caleb had put on the porch for exactly this purpose, having observed that Gaho would never ask for a chair but would use one if it was there. He took a sip, still trying, made the face, still terrible, but Gaho said, that's the same coffee you've been drinking for 6 months. It has not improved. You keep drinking it. Gaho looked at the mountains. Drank the coffee, still trying. They sat in the particular companionable silence of men who had been through enough together that they didn't need to fill space with words. Then Sena appeared in the doorway, Amma on her hip. 11 months old, still trying, already moving with that forward-leaning determination of a child who has decided that being carried is an insult and is working on alternatives. Sena set her down on the porch boards. Amma stood, wobbled, planted her feet, still trying, looked at Caleb with dark eyes that held both of them in them. Sena's directness, Caleb's particular quality of attention, and took 3 steps, fell, sat up, looked at the floor with an expression of mild outrage. Tried again, still trying. 4 steps this time before the knees went. Caleb crouched down. She saw him, made a sound that was not quite a word but was moving toward one. Reached for him. He picked her up. She grabbed his nose. He had not seen this move coming. Gaho, behind him, does that constantly. I've noticed. She got it from her mother. I have not ever grabbed anyone's nose, Sena said. You have grabbed considerably more alarming things than noses, Caleb said. She looked at him. He looked at her, little corner of her mouth, just barely. She sat down beside him on the porch step. Amma distributed between them, one hand on Caleb's arm, one hand in Sena's hair, still trying, seemingly content to simply occupy the space between 2 people as if that was precisely what the space had always been for. The morning light came over the mountains, hit the porch, hit all 4 of them. Sena looked at the light. This window, still trying, she said quietly. He looked at her. She looked at the mountain light coming across the porch boards. The particular gold of it, the window she'd said she wanted. To stay somewhere long enough to know which way the morning came, still trying. I know which way it comes now, she said. Caleb looked at the light, looked at Amma, who was chewing thoughtfully on his collar, looked at Gaho, who was on his 3rd cup of coffee he claimed to hate, looked at Sena. So do I, he said, and that was true. Still trying, and it was enough, and the sun came over the Bradshaw Mountains. And the porch was warm, and Caleb Hurst, who had spent 5 years in Ash, sat in the morning light of the life he had built from it, and did not look away.